Amanda, it's great to have you here. Just to kick us off, can you just share a little bit about your background and what led you into the oncology space?
Sure. It's lovely to be with you, Isabella, and congratulations on your podcast series. I know it's going to be a huge
Thank you.
success. So, as you can tell by my accent, I was originally born in the UK, but I've actually lived in the States, lived and worked in the States for gosh, close to 40 years now. And I've done many different things in my career. It's been a winding career. But most recently, before I took this role, I was in the finance industry, both alternatives and traditional finance, for 25 years. So in some ways, people are looking at me and saying, wow, this is a big shift from running a global association for women in the finance industry called 100 Women in Finance, which we grew over 20 years to what it is today, a global organization, and then moving into the stomach cancer field. But I think there are some similarities. I mean, it is a non-profit. Debbie's Dream Foundation Curing Stomach Cancer is the largest US-based stomach cancer charity, and we are having an impact on people's lives, and so there is some continuity there. But yes, 4 months into this new role, I am so excited to be in this space, and I think there are many things that I can bring to this space, but there's equally a ton that I have to be learning still around the challenges, but also opportunities in the stomach cancer arena.
Yeah, amazing. And the first time that we met, we touched briefly on the fact that we'd sort of entered the oncology industry at the same time. So we're sort of learning things at the same time, which is really interesting. How have you found stepping into a CEO role within an oncology foundation? How has it sort of shaped your perspective on the broader cancer ecosystem?
So I was kind of thrown in the deep end by attending in January, early January. I went to the ASCO conference, ASCO GI conference in San Francisco, which is a big gathering for those around the world in this ecosystem. What I would say is huge learning curve. In particular, in this space, the terminology, the medical terminology is kind of crazy. I'm not sure that I'll ever get there in terms of the terminology, but I am so lucky that between my board, the staff, those peers in leadership in the GI cancer space, and the wonderful patient advocates and those that are in the medical field and in the industry have been super supportive of me. They've kind of been patient while I asked silly questions, and I think questioning, questions and really understanding where different people are coming from is so critical. So it's been fun actually to learn about this space. I did myself a webinar series or a podcast series with women in oncology, in surgery, in preventative work in the stomach cancer space. And that was also a really great opportunity to learn not only about these amazing women and their background and how they came to be in the space and how inspiring they are, but also to ask them what the challenges and opportunities are in this space. And there are significant challenges, but there are also increasingly opportunities. So I've attended a number of conferences. Actually, I've just come back this last couple of weeks from a conference in Oxford in the UK, and over the weekend from a conference in Toronto that My Gut Feeling, who's one of our partners in the patient advocacy space, put on. And those are really good opportunities, not just to meet the players in this space, but also to hear from different perspectives. In Oxford, it was very much listening to those that are doing surgery and seeing on the big screen, videos of surgery being done, and how surgeons are now both utilizing robotics and AI to make their work more precise and learnable, is really extraordinary. And it was fascinating to see those videos, but also to hear the discussion in the audience with surgeons around how this whole space is becoming much more individualized. So patients are not just being heard, and it's not just their voice that's being heard, but actually they are now being treated very much as an individual. Each case, I could hear the surgeons talking about each case being individual. And then in Toronto, a whole mix of people giving their perspective, from those going through stomach cancer, extraordinary stories of resilience and persistence and self-advocacy, to caregivers of those who are going through this, equally important, to psychiatrists who are helping patients really with their mental health and well-being, to nutritionists who are helping patients think about how they might now eat food differently if they've had a gastrectomy. And then also, of course, the oncologists, the epidemiologists, the surgeons, those in industry that are providing enormous opportunities to scale up innovative ways to treat this disease. So really, I've had I think a very broad-based education, still learning every day, still learning about this space. What is clear is that we're in a moment in time in this industry, in this ecosystem, where there are enormous opportunities to accelerate towards better outcomes and ultimately to find that cure for stomach cancer. And that's happening because I think there is greater collaboration between people in different roles, between in different institutions across the world. And also, it's happening because there's been a real learning experience, I think, that's happened from learning from other cancer types. So tumors are tumors, right? There are certain things that they have in common across cancer types. And so we're seeing a lot of innovation happening in the stomach cancer space, where learnings have come from, for example, the breast cancer space. It's an exciting time, and I think AI and robotics, as I mentioned earlier, are just going to accelerate those opportunities for innovation.
Yeah. Sounds like from what you're seeing, there's a really positive outlook in the healthcare sector at the moment and how people approach cancer care and cancer research. What would you say is something that you continue to see or hear directly from patients and caregivers in terms of unmet needs?
I think that as much as I'm learning what's going on in the space, I think the
Mhm.
big unmet need is that those who've just been newly diagnosed, or those that are concerned about their digestive health for one reason or another, don't necessarily have access to all of the information. I would say that's the biggest issue. I think, having gone through cancer myself, breast cancer, many years ago, I think one of the things about cancer, and it actually came up at the Toronto My Gut Feeling conference this weekend, cancer and that diagnosis takes away control of your life. You suddenly feel like your life is not your own. It's being controlled by other forces. And I think learning and having access to knowledge and options and information about your DNA and your individual health helps patients and caregivers take back some of that control. So I think psychologically, that's one of the biggest needs for patients. And I wouldn't say it's totally unmet. There are obviously a lot of organizations trying to send out information and make sure that patients have access, Debbie's Dream Foundation being one of them. But I think that we all need to accelerate visibility around digestive health, both preventative. So, what I've learned in the last 4 years is there is a bacteria called H. pylori, which around the world causes 80%, or is potentially causal of 80% of stomach cancer, also causes ulcers and other issues. In the US, 60% of stomach cancers are related to an H. pylori bacteria. H. pylori is testable. There's a test for it. There are several tests for it. So we could be doing a much better job on the preventative side of helping people understand what's going on. And you can be then treated for it. And so one of the things that I think we do need to do is really raise awareness, particularly in at-risk populations. And one of those at-risk populations in the US is the military. So one of the things that Debbie's Dream Foundation does every year is to go on the Hill, to go on Capitol Hill, and advocate for more research funding. And that funding comes from the Department of Defense, Department of War in the US. And that's because it's a known fact that military, both serving and veterans, are more likely exposed to H. pylori because of where they're serving, the conditions under which they serve, change in diet, change in environment. So, having awareness of the fact that there are things we can all do to prevent prevent things from happening, I think is another way that we can all feel in control, right? But obviously, once you've had that diagnosis, it is a whole bunch of questions are in your mind. And certainly Debbie's Dream Foundation and a number of our partners are wanting to make sure that we become the go-to place. If you've got questions about what should you ask your doctor, where should you go, what are the clinical trials that are out there, what can I do in terms of getting support around this, both financially, but also in terms of others who are going through the journey. So I think it's very clear to me that information is power. The ability to access options is really powerful. And even in an environment where, one of the other indicators of stomach cancer is of course genetic. So CDH1 is a gene that tends to indicate that you have a proclivity to develop stomach cancer, particularly if it's obviously, if it's already come out within your family system. And the reality is that as painful as the decision is, do you have a gastrectomy, right? Do you do that preventatively, or do you go through, surveillance, and see where you end up? Those are difficult decisions, but at least you have the knowledge, right? At least you have the information to make those choices. So that's what I would say. I would say that there's just not enough awareness going on, what's going on with us in terms of our digestive health. And we need to do more to give people access to that information so that they are better equipped. One of the women who spoke in Toronto this weekend really said, it's so critical that we are all advocates for ourselves. There's no perfect healthcare system in this world. And those that really fight to make sure they are up to speed, that they know what questions to ask, are really the ones that seem to come out with better outcomes. So it's that collaborative nature, obviously, of the relationship between individual and doctor. But at the end of the day, we can all help ourselves by being informed about what the possibilities are.
Yeah, I think we're very lucky that we live in an age now where it's sort of at the tip of our fingertips to access that information. And I think all we can do as people who are lucky enough to get that knowledge and work in the oncology space is spread as much awareness as possible and use the likes of LinkedIn and podcasts to hopefully, give that awareness to the people who are looking for that information. So I completely agree with you there. Where do you see the most encouraging progress at the moment happening in stomach cancer research?
So again, I'm going to use non-medical terms because I'm working, but
Of course.
I think what seems to be very exciting, and this has come out of both ASCO, the Oxford conference that I went to, and over this weekend in Toronto, is this collaboration between doctors and others in the field across different disciplines. It used to be that you got a stomach cancer diagnosis and the only option was gastrectomy. And for some people, that may be the option now, but in terms of improving journeys and outcomes, we're really fortunate now to have, chemotherapy is still very often required, but immunotherapy treatments and biomarkers are all creating, as I said earlier, opportunities for much more personalized treatment. And you combine that with genetic testing, and you've got a combination of disciplines that when they come together, the results show that the outcomes are better, both in terms of survival rate, but also in terms of the journey the patient goes on. And so one example is for many patients, they're so sick. In the past, they've been so sick, they couldn't necessarily go to the surgery after having chemotherapy. But now with immunotherapy treatments, there's an opportunity for that surgery to take place and for them to be able to have another round of chemotherapy afterwards. So these combinations of solutions and all of the medical field working together, I think is a really, really interesting opportunity, and it's already showing results. So I would say that area is really fascinating in terms of everybody collaborating together. And I think, you know, this is where AI is going to play a really critical part, because if you think about all the data that is coming out of that combined collaboration, it's a ton of data. If we can share that data, we can see, what are the right outcomes and really use data data analytics in a way to look at where can we see improvements in outcomes.
Yeah. And am I right in thinking that you collaborate or have sponsorships with some of the bigger pharma companies like Novartis?
So Novartis isn't one of our current sponsors, although I'd love to
Yeah.
hear from them after this. But yeah, so we partner with a number of pharmaceutical companies as the patient connector. So when pharmaceuticals want to hear from patients, obviously they want to create more accessibility for clinical trials that they may be doing and for treatments that are out there. And from a regulatory perspective, they're not able to go directly to the patients. And so we're in a really perfect situation as patient advocates to be able to connect those who are patients or who are prospective patients to treatments and to opportunities for clinical trials, etc. So yes, the pharmaceutical companies support a lot of the education work that we do, support some of the seminars that we put on, which is all around raising awareness of the broad opportunities for patients and caregivers to collaborate with us and to hear directly from doctors and oncologists.
Yeah. Amazing. And is there any way that you think that the biotech and pharma companies can better integrate patient perspectives into development and clinical trials?
Yes, I think it's interesting because again, I'm new to this world, so I think it's at times challenging because of this regulatory separation between the development of drugs and treatments and the actual patient, and the need for a kind of a go-between. I think it's often a little challenging, but I think end of the day, those pharma companies, certainly I have a lot of ideas around, one of the big areas that a lot of farmers are really concerned about, and certainly so are those that are in the cancer space, is ensuring that treatments are accessible to everybody. And there certainly are some populations. For example, it was really fascinating in Toronto. One of the key surgeons in Brazil spoke about the real challenges of enabling rural communities to access care. And it's not dissimilar to, although much, much more tragic and challenging in a place like Brazil than the US, but it's not dissimilar to rural communities in the US, where you've got patients who, in order to be treated at one of the major cancer institutes in the US, have to travel a long distance. And that's tough it's tough both physically, financially. And so I think there's a lot more work, certainly that I'm hearing from the farmers, around ensuring that there is accessibility for populations that may be remote or may be culturally more likely to develop stomach cancer, and how do we make sure that we access those patients? And that's where the likes of Debbie's Dream Foundation, I think we can really help those trying to democratize, if you like, solutions for stomach cancer, to give access, because we're seen as the patient voice, we're seen as the patient
Yeah.
advocates. And so, it's much easier for us to do a reach out to a particular community. And we have amazing volunteers, amazing survivors, those that have been caregivers, a lot of people who are kind of, doing work for us. And one of the greatest services that they do to us is to spread the word amongst others.
Yeah.
It's to be that voice of somebody who's gone through this experience for others that maybe have just had a diagnosis.
Yeah. Okay, amazing. And from that sort of insider perspective of the advocacy side of things, what tangible impact have you seen advocacy have on research funding or policy or trial design?
So, 10 years ago, there was no specific funding for stomach cancer in the Department of Defense budget. Every year, Debbie's Dream Foundation has gone on the Hill to advocate. And what does that mean? It was my first time doing it this past February, and it's really an extraordinary experience. So we bring together our patient advocates, which include patients, caregivers, survivors, oncologists, physicians, surgeons, board members, and other volunteers, others that want to spend their day speaking to senators and congressmen on the Hill, in individual meetings. And I can tell you that the combination of having somebody in the room, so 8 people in the room representing Debbie's Dream Foundation, speaking to staff or the actual principal of the office about the experience, the challenges, the opportunities that come out of greater research funding, you can just see the impact. And we then follow that up with letters that both the senators and the congressmen sign, and that goes into the world of the appropriations budget. But what I can tell you is, over the years, we've been able to ensure that stomach cancer is specifically noted in the Department of Defense budget, and we've seen real research being funded out of that budget. So, over a period of time, advocating and ensuring that our voice is heard definitely makes a difference. I think there is more to be done, not just on the Hill, out there in terms of really raising awareness of research grants that are out there for stomach cancer or for GI cancer, and making the connection between the researchers around the world and that funding. And this is another thing, I've done it to some extent in the finance world, connecting funding to women who are running a fund. And I'd like to see us do more of that, ensuring that our voice translates into more money from around the world, whether that's private philanthropy, whether it's venture capital in this space. I think there's a lot that we can explore in that area, or it is government funding, really making that connection between the money and the enormous number of fantastic research ideas that are out there. And I think I think that there's a lot more that we can be doing, but I've already seen that advocacy works. So just by us showing up for a day in DC this February, we've got a good number of congressmen who have already, they've already put their letter in, and then we're now working on the Senate side. And those letters, those meetings that we've had translate into a vote, essentially, a vote for more stomach cancer funding. So really proud of the work that Debbie's Dream Foundation has done over the years on that. It's a significant effort, but it definitely does pay off.
Yeah, it's really amazing to see and inspiring to see the work that Debbie's Dream Foundation are doing. I think the main theme that I'm getting from this conversation and from watching your own podcasts and talks that you're having, is that collaboration is what's really pushing everyone through this space and what's allowing all the research to be done. And obviously, you've been collaborating with women. I'd like to hear a little bit about that and what inspired you to start interviewing women across the oncology space.
So I come from a background where I was focused on creating more visibility for women in the finance space, particularly women who are investors. And so it just occurred to me as I came in, I was brand new. First of all, selfishly, it was an opportunity for me to kind of learn from women in this
Yeah,
space, but equally in across so many different sectors, there are brilliant women at the top doing amazing work, but they're often not the ones that end up at the conferences. They're often not visible. And so I thought it would be a really nice opportunity for International Women's Day to do a series. And it ended up being bigger than I expected. So 24 interviews with women across 11 countries and 20 research institutions and also industry were included in this. So I think it was a real opportunity to, as I said, create visibility, but also again to create connections between those women around the world. They all knew somebody on the list, but I think, that ability to say, oh my gosh, there are others like me out there was fantastic. So I think it was great for the women who were involved in terms of raising their visibility. But also, part of the reason for doing this was so that we can inspire the next generation. And I think, what I've seen in my work over the last 25 years is that if the next generation of young women can see that it's possible for someone like them to have an impact on the world, whether that's in the finance space or it's in this new space that I'm in, is really powerful. So seeing somebody who's looks like you or has had the same experience or like the same subjects you like at school, being interviewed and acknowledging that they are truly making a difference in the world. As someone said to me recently, oh my gosh, I mean, you spent years in the finance industry and you did so much good, but now you're potentially going to save lives. And it's kind of like that, that sense of being in a role where you can use your professional abilities to save lives is, I think, incredibly inspiring and powerful for certainly for all of us, but hopefully for the next generation. It's a tough career choice, right? Medicine is not easy. It's a long process, it's an expensive process. But I think if we can encourage more women and young men to look at this as a career, then we are all better off. So that was also part of what I wanted to do. And I am going to continue because I'm equal opportunity, right? So in November for International Men's Day, yes, there is an International Men's Day. I want to do a similar process for men who are in this space. And funnily enough, just this morning, I kind of said to the women who were participating, because we're all hoping to, or a number of us are hoping to meet up at some of the upcoming conferences. I'd already asked them, are there more women for my 2027 International Women's Day session? And I've just been sent, a list of other names to consider. I think, little by little, we want to create the sense that anybody can be in these roles, right? And the way to do that is to demonstrate that, an expert in whatever field can be a woman, can be a woman of color, can be a woman from a poor background or a rural background or whatever. Doesn't have to be the same old, same old. So for me, visibility matters a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important that we elevate those voices, and I think it's crucial for the next generation that we advocate for women in the space and soon men in the space. And what comes to mind is even looking at yourself. I think obviously you're a great leader. You've come into this space without really any clue on what really you're coming into. And I think you've been a great example that to lead, you also have to follow, and we have to listen to other people. We have to learn from other people in different positions, whether that's higher or lower, and collaborate to really keep space moving forward. So I completely agree with that. Just as a final question, looking ahead, what is giving you the most optimism right now in the stomach cancer space?
So I think, as you've said, it's this real sense of collaboration. And I'm seeing it with my peers, so the leaders in this space really coming together, um, and saying, actually, let's make sure that we are working together as patient advocacy groups. What can we learn from each other? Where can we work together? Where can we support each other? So I'm really excited about that. And I also think, I'm excited about the opportunities to really make sure that we are connecting those that need resources to those that have resources. And whether that's, as I said, I think the opportunities to really connect funding sources directly to researchers so that we can accelerate the research that's being done. We need a lot more research done. Digestive health remains a very underfunded, under-researched arena. I think there are plenty of people out there who can do the research, who can really come up with some innovative ideas. They just need the money, the funding to do it. And so making those connections, as we mentioned earlier, making the connection between industry and the patient voice and
Mhm.
ensuring that those voices are heard. And also ensuring that at-risk populations, and it's interesting, we're focused on the US military, but I've also had some conversations around the UK armed forces, because in my mind, if the US military is at risk for H. pylori, the UK armed forces are going to the same places in the same environments. And so I'm doing some work now to ensure that we can connect, those that are working in the armed forces, ensuring that the patient voice, which in this case is the those that have served in the armed forces, that their voice gets heard, and that their service is rewarded with ensuring that we're doing everything we can to protect them from digestive health issues as a result of their service. So I think that this connection and collaboration is what I'm most excited about. At the end of the day, it may be a few years before we get a cure, but in the meantime, we can all, by working together and bringing our different perspectives to this issue, we can all make the patient journey better and the outcomes and the survivability better until that day that we have a cure for stomach cancer.
Yeah, of course. Well, Amanda, thank you so much for a really thoughtful conversation and joining me on the call today. I hope from this conversation people feel encouraged and inspired to learn more about stomach cancer and hopefully support advocacy initiatives, and also tune into Amanda's podcast to hear insight from men, which will be coming towards the end of the year. But yeah, thank you so much for
You're
joining me
really
again.
welcome. Yes, any information people want, you can just go to debbiesdream.org. So it's really been lovely to speak to you. Thank you.
Yes, you too. Thank you so much. Bye bye.